Powers 2, The Cult of Warp, by Rob Harper. Prologue.
In an old graveyard on the grounds of the Wildebeest Foundation for Exceptional Youths, it is here that many unsung heroes of the past have been laid to rest. And it is here that the founder of the school, Professor Hildebrand Wildebeest, the current Professor Wildebeest's father, was buried many years ago. But today, this quiet little graveyard is not totally empty. There is one mourner. One man comes to visit an old friend. Standing over the grave of Professor Hildebrand Wildebeest is a tall, gray-haired, middle-aged man wearing a flowing black trench coat. At his side are two large mastiffs. His look is somewhat somber, the look of someone visiting the grave of a good friend. In his gloved hand is a single white rose.
Ah, Hildebrand, I miss you, old friend.
The man drops the rose onto Wildebeest's grave.
At least you can rest easy that your beta are still living your dream. And from what I hear, your son is quite a good mentor. You taught them well.
He looks up suddenly as he hears others approach. His introspection is interrupted by the arrival of three people. The current Professor Wildebeest, along with two of his prize students, Melanie Odd, known as the Oddess, and Ben Wolf, who is also known as the Claw, have come to pay their respects too.
Speak of the devil.
Melanie is first to notice that the graveyard is not as empty as per usual.
Professor, who's that standing near your father's grave?
Wildebeest looks and is almost knocked to the ground with shock.
What is it, Professor? Are you all right?
Melanie and Ben grab Wildebeest before he loses his balance completely. Wildebeest and the stranger lock eyes for a second.
I thought that was someone. No, it couldn't be. Much too young. Magnus? No, he's dead. I'm sorry. I thought I recognized that man for a second. But I think that my eyes are finally failing me.
Well, whoever he was, he's gone now. Quick for an older guy.
Yes. Well, then let us go pay our respects to my father, and let the other mourner leave our thoughts.
Wildebeest is worried, and maybe not so much that his eyesight may be failing, but rather that he saw only too clearly who the stranger was.
Chapter 1.
Mount Wonder, site of many a battle over the legacy of the godlike Evolver, is now thought to stand empty. And empty it did stand for many years, as any of the Evolver's best-kept secrets were plundered and taken away. But now Mount Wonder has a new mistress. Sin stands silently, looking over the snow-covered peaks, always lost in thought. Thoughts of her mother and her royal family of Incredibles, and their own home on the dark side of the moon. How would life have been different had they all not died in the lunar disaster that was the precursor to the Alien War? Her thoughts drift to her father and her aunt, who seemingly died with the rest of the Justice Club, fighting the aliens to a standstill, thus allowing Doc Odd to create a rift through which both the invaders and the defenders were lost. Her thoughts then race back farther, back before the war, to the time when things began to go wrong. Why had her parents refused to allow her to be exposed to the power mist, which gives all incredible children who are exposed great powers? Neither her nor her brother Aku were allowed to truly join the race of Incredibles, and so when they were all destroyed, they were spared. She and Aku were sent by her Aunt Wilma to stay with the first family in the city. Her aunt had seen a precognitive vision, and knew that her brother's children needed to be saved, and thus the two children were orphaned and left in the care of the first family. Sin never cried when she heard her mother and the rest of the Incredibles had been wiped out, nor when they told her that her father had been killed. Maybe by then it was too late for her. Now one thing remains on her mind, and that is to find the power mist. The Incredibles had sent it to the first family along with her and her brother for safekeeping, and now was the time for her to take back her legacy. Sin's thoughts are disrupted by one of her minions. Being the granddaughter of Warp had its advantages. In the many years since her grandfather's death, his image had risen to godlike proportions. Warp was more than a supervillain. He fought for the right of the powers to rule this world. Powers around the world worshipped him, and being the only public member of his lineage left on Earth, it was a simple matter to convert those who worshipped her into her personal powered army. The minion in question was her right-hand man, Rook. Rook had the useful ability to create dimensional doorways wherever he wants. Right now, Sin wants him in the first family place.
The assault team is ready, mistress.
Excellent, Rook. You know what we need. Go and get it for me.
As you command, mistress.
Sin smiles as she feels one step closer to the mist. The Beta's wild plane gently lands upon the roof of the first family place, and the Beta themselves disembark with alarming speed. The Claw, Otis, Portal, Thrust, and Congo Knight are met by the newest First family, Joe First, Liz Nix, and the Streak, along with the old, metal-skinned It.
We never thought you'd be calling us for help, Joe. From what I hear, You could pretty much handle anything. And now that you guys have Liz on your side...
I'm glad you answered my call, Beta. And as for me being able to handle anything that confronted us, well, let's just say that after pulling Liz out of the time nexus into the future to be with me again, I'm not quite the man I used to be.
I see. So Liz, how does it feel to be pulled into the future? Doesn't sound nice to me.
Otis noticed that both Liz and Joe definitely didn't look so good.
I assure you, it wasn't a pleasant experience, even for someone like me, so used to time traveling. But it was well worth it to be with Joe again. It was getting a little creepy, him being so much younger than me.
Enough small talk, people. If you hadn't forgotten, you're all here for a reason. Let's go.
Yes, quite true, It. I've called you here because we've got some intruders downstairs who seem to be trying to steal something out of our archives. Inside the archives is every piece of information my father amassed before he retired. They could be after anything for creating the Great Destroyer, or maybe they're looking to get into the zone. Anyway, we have them locked down in a force shell in the archive database room, but it's only a matter of time before they break out.
Well, you called the right people. Pest extermination's our middle name.
The two teams quickly make their way to the archive room. Within, Rook and his squad of evil powers speedily try and disable the force field, preventing him from creating a dimensional doorway and escaping. Finally, the force field is down, but before Rook can create a doorway, the Beta and the First Family attack.
They got here faster than anticipated.
A pitched battle ensues, with Thrust and Congo Knight attacking whatever moves in the room. Rook has one of his squad create a telepathic bubble preventing Congo Knight from summoning his animal powers. But Thrust's speed takes out another squad member, before they can knock him out with a stun blast. Portal leads the charge into the room, followed by the It, the Claw, and Streak, who fly towards the closest minions, with her light trail streaking behind her. Otis tries to cast a quick anti-portal spell to stop the minions from escaping the way they must have come in, but it's too late. Rook grabs the wounded minions and pulls his squad out through a dimensional doorway. The Beta and First Family stand in despair within the now empty room. Joe rushes to the archive console to see what the invaders took, while Otis tries to locate the thieves with another spell.
Strange. It seems they didn't even try to access any of its science files. They accessed the database to find the location of Aku.
Aku? What the hell is an Aku?
Aku isn't a what, but rather a who. What would they want with him, I wonder?
Who the hell is Aku?
About 10 years ago, after the Alien War, Mary and Bill adopted 2 kids who happened to be here when the Incredibles' moon base was destroyed. They were Sin and Aku Markov, the daughter and son of Matilda of the Incredibles and Warpster of the Justice Club, and Warp's son. Well, after what happened to the Incredibles and the Justice Club, these 2 kids stayed here. We raised them as best the supergroup could, until one day an extra-dimensional alien named Rox attacked. He was annoying and shut the place up with his molecular ager thingy. It turned metal to rust and decayed flesh. Nasty weapon. Anyway, Aku got blasted in the crossfire. Lucky it wasn't a full blast. The kid lived. He just aged 40 years in a matter of seconds. From then on, Bill refused to have kids around so they wouldn't get hurt. He sent Sid and Joe off to different boarding schools, and Aku went to a secret location where he hoped the kid could try and grow into his old body. He never told any of us where he sent him. I don't know why he didn't. Who knows? Bill is a bit of a flake sometimes. I wonder why anyone would want to get to Aku.
So no one knows where this Aku is?
No. Bill and Mary offer exploring the galaxy, so you can't even ask them.
Just then, Otis comes out of her trance.
I tracked them astrally for as long as I could, and then I lost them. One thing's for sure, they aren't in North America.
Well, that's that then. With no way to find Aku or track the thieves, I don't know what we can do now.
We'll keep trying to track them from here. Thanks for your help, Beta, and we'll call you if we get anything.
Joe shakes each of the Beta's hands and leads them back to their wild plane. Once aboard, the Claw voices his anger, along with a firm punch to the side of the plane.
I hate leaving it like that.
Settle down, honey. What more can we do? Let's go back to the Foundation and hope the First Family come up with something.
Back at the Foundation, the wild plane lands, and the team walks up the stairs to their underground base, tired and agitated. At the top of the stairs, waiting for them, is a tall, gray-haired man of great composure, flanked on both sides by 2 black Mastiff dogs.
I've been waiting for you, Beta.
Most of the group is confused by this person, who is standing in their underground headquarters. Most, but not all. One Beta knows perfectly well who the stranger is. His father had told the boy many times about the greatest supervillain ever to cross the Beta, Standing before them was the man who had once ripped out the boy's father's claws. This is the man his father mortally wounded just before the stranger was killed in Africa. The Claw feels the rage build in him. He gently whispers the man's name, hiding the anger inside, as a precursor to the onslaught he's about to release.
Warp.
Chapter 2.
The Claw is ready to pounce as Warp stands defiantly. Enki and Enlil, Warp's mastiff dogs, menacingly stand between the Claw and their master.
You'll find that I'm not as easy to stop as my father, Warp.
Just as the Claw's muscles ready for his attack, Professor Wildebeest walks out from behind Warp.
Oh, settle down, Benjamin. Warp is here as a friend.
But I thought Warp was dead, Professor.
That, my child, was true. But now I'm alive again. It is something that I myself can't truly explain.
Alive or dead, Warp is still a villain.
The Claw is far beyond words, but Ada steps between him and his prey.
Ben, settle down. Let's hear what he has to say. If you don't like it, you can always flay him later.
She smiles, and the Claw eases off slightly.
Thank you, dear. I see that the Beta have continued their record of wise leaders.
Warp is calm and confident, and the dogs too ease off, knowing that their enemy is standing down.
I will now tell you my story, as best I know it. I have indeed been dead for more than 20 years. When my African compound fell, I felt myself rise up and dissipate. I was quite dead. But, as time slowly went on, I realized that I wasn't gone from this world. I still had thoughts. I still dreamed. As I floated in limbo, I had much time to dwell on my past triumphs and mistakes. I saw myself for the first time from a different perspective. I saw the crimes I committed in the name of power superiority. I saw my time as a teacher here at Wildebeest's. I saw my rise to power in my African compound. And I saw my death. All this I saw, and instead of going on to whatever is beyond life, I instead began to coalesce again. Eventually I woke up on the shores of South Africa. 20 years had passed, but it felt like days or weeks. My first contact with this new world was a farmer named Gunter. Gunter had been walking his two dogs, Enki and Enlil, here, along the beach, and they found me washed ashore. I awoke in Gunter's home. He had nursed me back from my rebirth, and slowly I started to remember what had happened to me. The first shock to my system was not that I had been dead for so long, but rather I seemed to be even younger than when I was when I died. Whatever force brought me back, it had healed all of my old wounds, and regenerated some of my lost youth. It seemed to me that I had been sent back for a purpose, but even now I have no idea what that purpose is. As I stayed with Gunter, to regain my full strength, the old man seemed nice enough. But slowly I began to realize that he had held racist beliefs from the old South African regime. That kind of hatred indeed takes generations to be erased. He lived on a failing farm and irrationally blamed the blacks for his troubles. It was when Gunter started to rant about how the blacks should be controlled by genetically superior whites that I began to see the parallels between Gunter and myself. How different was Gunter's views about racial superiority than my old beliefs about humans being ruled by powers. I stayed with Gunter much longer than I needed to, hoping that I could see something that separated the way I had been from the views of such a man, but I found none. The final straw came when, late one night, I was awoken by a clamor outside. I looked outside to see Gunter locking his gate as a mob of townsfolk of all backgrounds came rushing up to it. Gunter ran into the house and asked him what had been happening. He calmly told me what he had done. He had killed a little black girl. He justified his actions to me by saying, "What does that matter? She was only a black girl." I stood shocked for a few moments. Had I been this flippant with human lives in the past? The answer was obvious. Had I not killed the crew of that Chinese submarine with a thought? And that was just one occasion. I had indeed been this bad, and worse. My heart filled with remorse that may God never let any of you feel. I half-heartedly threatened to give Gunter to the mob, but I was weary and wished that I'd never come back. Gunter pleaded with me not to give him over. He had saved me after all, but right then that didn't seem like a good thing. I instead left, and Enki and Enlil followed me. They too seemed to know what was to come of their old master. The mob was having a hard time with the reinforced gates to Gunter's farm, but eventually they would break in. As I looked over the farmhouse from a nearby hill, I felt that I needed to learn who I was and what I had come back for. I knew I had to make reparations for the things I had done, for the monster I had been. I turned my back on the farm and headed north. As I walked away, I ripped the gates open, letting the mob at Gunter. I walked north, through Africa, on a sort of spiritual trek, stopping to work when I needed food or lodging. Eventually I made it to Egypt, and happened to stumble upon a sect who were worshipping me as some kind of god. I hid my identity from them, but gleaned some information about their organization. It seemed my granddaughter Sin is leading them now. Before they were quite a reclusive group, but with Sin leading them, they had begun to become more aggressive and militant. I think...
That's a pretty story, but I find it hard to believe. So I'm doing what Otis said to do. I gave you a chance, and now I'm going to flay you.
The claw starts to leap at Warp, but is stopped midair by one of Otis's spells.
You have got to take a breath here, lover.
Otis walks up to the claw's suspended frame. She looks deep in his eyes, and then gives him a kiss that magically disperses all of his rage, if not his feelings of distrust. Otis then lets the claw down gently. Professor Wildebeest calls the truth out from the base.
I, too, had my doubts, Benjamin. But George confirms Warp's story. And no matter how fanciful, it seems the truth is never wrong.
It is my gift. It is my curse. The truth? Isn't he Warp's grandson? How can we trust him?
The claw turns his anger towards the truth, whom he has always disliked due to the truth's pacifism. The truth looks enraged, but before he can speak to defend himself, Professor Wildebeest does that for him.
Now, Benjamin, you know as well as I do that the truth never lies. Now calm yourself.
The claw finally has to listen to reason, but he still doesn't trust Warp.
I understand your distrust, Claw. I would have gladly continued my personal journey without troubling you with the knowledge of my resurrection, but I fear what my granddaughter is about to do. From what the cultist in Egypt told me, even they think she might have totally lost all of her senses.
I think this theft from First Family Place is way too much of a coincidence. Sin is after the location of her brother for some reason, but we still aren't any closer to his whereabouts or hers.
So we're still at square one. Man, I wish we could get some breaks here. Where's the psychics when you need them? I mean, have you guys noticed that we're really lacking on some psychic strength here?
I may know where Sin is, but it's not going to be easy to get in there. My son and daughter always had an affinity for one place, Mount Wonder, and I doubt my granddaughter is any different.
How can you be sure?
I am sure. It's almost like Sin is calling me to her. Beta, you must trust me. I have to go to Mount Wonder. Alone.
Chapter 3.
After confronting the seemingly reformed Warp, the claw needs something to release his anger, so he finds himself in the Beta's personal gym. He wails on a punching bag, while trying to forget that his teammates and mentor are planning on trusting the man the Beta were created to battle. He punches harder and harder, until the bag's chains holding it up give way, and it flies across the gym. To the claw's surprise, the bag stops midair, and he knows who stopped it.
What do you want?
I thought we might need to talk. It seemed to me that you have some unresolved issues with me.
I have nothing to say to you.
You sound like your father.
I am nothing like my father. All my father ever gave me was this claw, so that I might be more like him. But I'm nothing like him.
He gave you his claw? I assumed he was killed.
Warp didn't like the thought of the boy's father still being alive, and ready to get some revenge, like his son.
This claw was broken off in his final battle with Inviscerator. My father is indeed alive, Warp, and if I want you dead, he must really want you dead.
So Connor is alive. Oh well, I'll have to convince him of my sincerity too, when the time comes. So where is your father? It'll make it easier to apologize to him if I knew where he might be.
I haven't seen my father since he left my mother, and that was when I was 10. That's when he gave me these and went off on his own. He didn't feel like having a family anymore.
I'm not one to lecture people on being a good father. If Warpster were still here, he could tell you how I messed up with him and his sister. But Connor has always wanted nothing but a family. If he left you and your mother, it was probably to protect you, not because he didn't want you.
Warp could see the claw's pain, and wished he could do something to help.
I know you don't need me to tell you that you should forgive your father, but believe me, I wish I had a second chance to talk to Peter and Wilma. You only really know how much you miss someone once they're gone. If you can, don't pass up being with your family. You never know when you might not get the opportunity.
With that, Warp nods his head and walks out of the gym to prepare to meet his own family. He hopes that Sin will forgive him, as much as he hopes that the Claw will forgive Connor. The Claw watches Warp leave. He too has a lot to think about, mostly about his father, but some of his thoughts will be about how he may have misjudged the man known as Warp. Meanwhile, Sin has been thinking of her dear old deceased grandfather also, as she prepares to have a reunion with her long-lost brother Aku. What would Granddad think of little Sin now? following in his great footsteps, or at least pretending to follow in his footsteps. In truth, she could care less about the power's supremacy. In fact, she isn't even superpowered, which, in the end, is why she's doing all this. Tricking Warp's followers into being in her army, attacking the first family in their own home, and now going to find her brother, it was all for one reason: to gain power. She wasn't born of power, but she'll be damned if she'd be denied her birthright 1 second longer. Sin will find the power mist, and she will become even more powerful than her dear old departed grandfather. She orders Rook to create a dimensional portal to Aku. It seems Bill first hid her brother, all those years ago, in a quiet little monastery in Northern California. What better place for a prematurely aged boy to try and grow into his body? Rook opens the gateway, and Sin arrives, alone, in a quiet garden on the monastery grounds. Peacefully tending a rosebush, in the corner is an elderly monk who Sin instantly recognizes as her brother. She hasn't seen him in at least a decade.
Aku?
Sin almost sounds overwhelmed by emotions as she reaches out for her brother.
Huh? Who's that? My eyesight's not what it used to be. I'm not a young man anymore. Of course, I never really was a young man, but who's counting?
Aku, it's me, Sin, your sister.
Sin walks up to the old man and rests her hand on his cheek.
Oh, Sin, I can't believe it's you. Bill told me it was the best no one knew I was here. I'm so glad he decided to tell you.
Aku is crying now on Sin's shoulder, but Sin steals her gaze.
Aku, you have to tell me where the power mist is. Bill asked me to come here. He needs it.
Sin is holding her brother's head in her hands.
Bill told me never to tell anyone, not even you. He told me to keep it safe. He said that one day you'd come like this, and I was not to tell you anything.
Aku is getting worried and scared as he finally sees the look in his sister's eyes. Sin lets go of her brother and steps back.
Bill, always so smart. Too smart for his own good, if you ask me. I'll have to deal with him when he gets back from his trip. By then, I'll be ruling this pathetic planet, of course. You know what I think. I'll just send people out to kill him. By then, I'll be beyond having to do all that.
Sin, you have to stop. Why are you doing this?
Why? I'm doing this because our beloved parents not only abandoned us, but also didn't even allow us the decency to give us our birthright as Incredibles and expose us to the mist so that we could defend ourselves. And what happened? You're only 20 and probably won't live to see 30, and I'm denied my rightful place as the successor to our grandfather Warp. I should be a god, and instead I'm stuck down here like a worm.
Sin's face is contorted with rage, and Aku steps away from her afraid.
Please, brother, cooperate. I'd hate for anything bad to happen to this place, this wonderful garden. You know, I have people working for me who can create fire from nothing. It's called pyrokinetics, I believe. Imagine what they could do to you, garden. Imagine the destruction.
No, please, Sin. You can't. This garden has been my life. If you were to destroy it, you might as well destroy me.
Then tell me, Aku, where is the mist? Tell me, or all of this will be ashes.
Oh, Sin, I feel I've already lost my sister. The mist is in my room. There's a secret compartment behind the door. Please, just take it and leave in peace.
Aku looks even older and weaker than ever. Sin takes Aku in her arms and hugs his head.
I do love you, Aku, but I can't have you telling anyone what I'm doing.
With a snap, Sin breaks Aku's neck in a single quick jerk. His body drops to the ground, and Sin looks down upon the last thing between her and her goal.
To be continued.
And you're like, oh, that sucks. We like them. They died. And then
No one
it
likes
turns out
them. No one likes any of our characters.
everybody likes Mac and Brandon.
No, everyone hates our characters.
Oh, you're so down on yourself.
I am, because no one buys our swag from that website.
CafePress.com/Finland Rolltime Radio?
Yeah, I wish people
would.
would.
I know. We want to kill ourselves.
You know, it might help.
Prevent our suicide. Buy some swag.
Quite frankly, you know, we are quite poor. We got bills to pay, mouths to feed.